at some point, if you get to live a long life, you'll be the old person in the room that not everyone wants to talk to.
That's it.
Because you won't be interesting or attractive or have anything to offer necessarily. And so even if it just is that experience, you'll feel like, oh, well, this isn't very inclusive. Like, oh, I don't feel very welcomed here. Oh, I feel like people don't even see me. So hopefully if you live a long life, anyone will get to realize the answer of why inclusion matters, because it's actually a fundamental part of being human.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on stolen Yagara and Turrbal lands, and as settlers of colour, we reflect upon the damaging legacy of colonisation. Always was, always will be.
My name is Roman. I create memories. I create sentiment. No, I'm a freestyle performer, I guess. Freestyle MC, but I also do a bit of singing, bit of toasting, and kind of whatever the song requires. I play with projects Life on Earth, based in Edinburgh, Brisbane, and then BULLHORN as well, which is a big brass band. And then in now Melbourne, I play with The Moment, which is similar to Life on Earth in that it's a kind of improvisational show where everyone's freestyling together. BULLHORN doesn't freestyle entirely because it's written charts for musicians who can read and perform and blast really at a high level, and then I'm usually freestyling over the top of that.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of freestyle. I also am just inherently, I guess, an artist who likes to write songs and make music. I haven't released a bunch of stuff. I've done some collaborations with artists like Desmond Cheese. And I've often thought of myself more as a performer than even a musical artist, but that's kind of changing with time as I start to just enjoy being a musical person who likes creating, so thus artist.
Right. And speaking of The Moment and your perhaps transition into journeying from a performer to the artist, what does the moment allow now? Like if you're say a younger Roman dreaming of being a musician, looking into the future, looking at yourself right now, like what is it that you can do at this point in your career?
That's actually a cool question. It just reminded me of a moment of epiphany that I actually had forgotten about until you just said that.
Okay.
And to mention the moment, I have to kind of give this anecdote through an experience that happened with Life on Earth.
Yeah.
And so Life on Earth were playing, I think, Yonder Festival some years ago. And we were playing like the main stage, and it was like the headline for the Friday night or something like that.
Yeah.
And I had just driven there after a big work day, and I texted two of my childhood friends. So my old friend Dan and then my old friend Joe. Shout outs Dan and Cree and Joe, let's get it. But I remember I had texted them something like, I've checked into so many music festivals now with BULLHORN, and you just get used to the kind of hum of just the industry, small things of, a sign-in gate. Yeah. But because it was Life on Earth, which I should clarify was like the first musical project that I actually started.
Right.
So it had this moment of like, I turned 30 and I just hit this point of like self-belief / life's so short, no one else is going to give me permission. I just got to give myself permission to make what I want to exist happen. So I went, headhunted all my favorite musicians and said, do you want to do shows where we try to make up really meaningful songs? So it's not an improv jam as much, but like an improvised songwriting experience with a lot of intention and vulnerability, hopefully.
Right.
And they were like, sounds dope, bro. And then we did it. So fast forward, we're at Yonder. I've checked in. I text my childhood friends, hey, after signing into so many festivals with BULLHORN, shout outs to how fun that is.
Yeah.
But it hit different. It was like a Friday night. I'd got in there late, and I was just like, wow, I can't believe this project that improvises shows is now playing a main stage festival. Like it was a indie festival, shout outs to the Under crew.
Yeah.
But it was like something about it was sentimental. And then my childhood friend Joe texted me back, wasn't that like that dream that you talked about? And I was like, wait, what? And I had completely forgotten that when I discovered freestyle rap, like the very early stages of me discovering it, before I'd even jumped on stage or rapped in front of another person, I was close friends with Joe, and I was saying how cool it was. And man, like, because I didn't grow up with hip hop and freestyle rap, and I discovered it later in life.
Yeah.
Later in life, being like just after high school. And I remember being like, imagine like, this is before I knew any live musicians or instrumentalists. And I was like, yeah, imagine like a freestyle happening, but like the whole band was freestyling at the same time. And I didn't have any of the musical language, say an improvisational act. Like I just was like, imagine everyone freestyling at like a festival though, like, and you just freestyle the whole show. Can you imagine it? And it was this whole thing that I'd forgotten about. But when she told me that, it hit. And I was like, whoa, I'm ticking off like a childhood dream or like a teenhood dream. Yeah. And it had just almost passed me by, like that gratitude.
Yeah.
And so that night just hit so different. And I think as I was reflecting on that, I looked out over the festival from where I'd parked on this hill and I saw this massive shooting star. And I remember just being like, man, life's crazy. Like, I'm not trying to say, universal providence stuff. I'm just like, it was the most incredible thing to remember. Like how first of all, how crazy is life that you can forget a childhood dream?
Yeah.
Let alone be like, oh yeah, that was the dream. How dope. Like, yeah, so that was cool. But anyway, so fast forward that, years later, in Melbourne now, the moment is continuing that sort of childlike vision at just this insane level of musicianship, because the players are just, from my favorite like band growing up, Hiatus Coyote, we've got Bender and Perrin on bass and drums.
Right.
And then Aaron Chulay, director of the Australian Art Orchestra, on keys, next to Brett Williams on keys, who's just this insane cat. I don't even know how to describe him. He's played for Stevie Wonder. Like, he's just this insane. Every time some great American musician passes away, and I'm seeing all the memes about it, I just see like photos of Brett with these people, like, gonna miss you, homie. And I'm just like, what? How did you even know them? That's crazy. Right. Like Quincy Jones was the last one. And I was like, yeah, of course you do. Of course you just homies with Quincy. But he played, like when he plays, and I don't know if he'll ever hear this. I hope he doesn't, so he doesn't even realize how much I'm such a deep fan. He's such a great musician, but more than that, his vibe as a person, like he's a dad, and his little Bubba comes to the shows, and just the humility and the general spirit of like openness that he comes into the room with and plays with. I just love it. And then Lanius is on guitar and vocals, who, if you know Lanius, if you don't know Lanius, go check Lanius out. Right. But he's my favorite solo artist in Australia. Just absurdly talented, here for the humor, here for the beauty, here for the inconsistent human stickiness, I love it. So the moment is just continuing that vision. Sorry, I talked for a long time, but
no, I love
talking
that.
On childhood dreams, baby.
Yeah. So not only like these many years later, not only have you like fully embellished that childhood, teenhood dream, but you've duplicated it in another city.
Yeah. Well, I was traveling so much for work, and I was like, I want to keep the jams going.
Right.
And so I just, me and Lockie Lanius, we would jam whenever we could. He has the Uncomfortable Science Project where he writes arrangements in the moment on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
And like live in the moment, not in the moment. This is the annoying part of these kinds of band names. So it's like, oh. But anyway, he writes these arrangements, and these crazy musicians who are always different follow along. And then I would talk to him about putting on a festival called The Moment, which would be like Life on Earth, Uncomfortable Science, and just different, even the next, like a really cool improvisational one-day festival.
Right.
And then that's still kind of a goal, but at one point, I think it was a couple of years ago now, or a year and a half ago, we were just like, let's just organize a gig and call it The Moment. And then we did it. And from the second we did soundcheck, I've still got this audio recording on my phone because I immediately hit quick record on my Apple Watch.
Right.
Just from soundcheck with those band players, like it was about 60 seconds in and everyone just paused for a second, went, can we just be a band, please? Can we be a band forever? And everyone was having the best time they've ever had. It was so fun. Okay. I remember Perrin came up to me after. He was like, man, that's some of the, I don't want to like talk outside of school, I guess, but he was just like, that's one of the funnest things I've done like in years. I was like, the funnest gig in years. I was like, bro, you've been on the craziest touring schedule. Right. Is that for real?
Yeah.
He was just like, man, it hit different. Like there's that childlike joy, I think, with creatives and musicians, especially when you're improvising collectively, that play, but play at an excellent level where each individual musician in that group is doing something that to all the other musicians is like, what? How can you even? But everyone feels that way about each other. Like, I find it insane that Brett Williams, who literally is the most tasty musician I've heard improvise, whatever the tone, texture, or melody is, hears me do some, what I think, silly punchline or freestyle compliment to an audience member. And it's like, yo! And he's like all child state about that. I'm like, why is that even impressive? You just made actual magic happen. But yeah, it was just that moment where it all came together and we're like, all right, this is a project. And I travel enough for work that it was like almost a monthly kind of gig.
Right.
Now it's sort of like bi-monthly.
Okay.
We're just kind of, it's ad hoc, it's improv. So it's not on a very rigorous industry plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's enough to sort of like fill the cup in between all the other projects that
Totally. Yeah. And I think everyone just enjoys it. I think in the new year, we're going to organize a sort of like Snarky Puppy style in-studio concert.
Right.
Have audience members on cans.
Damn,
and
that is exciting.
Yeah.
They're touring, right?
Sorry?
They're touring, right? Snarky.
Yeah. They're coming next year.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so excited. I discovered Snarky Puppy. I remember I had been offered from someone in Brisbane. They were like pushing tickets and they were like, hey, I can get you a backstage pass / VIP ticket if you help promote the gig or something. But I was really busy at the time and I didn't know who they were. So I was like, oh, that's cool. I was all like hyper aware of getting exploited, like free labor, all that. And I was just so young and unfamiliar. And I was just like, no, that's good, whatever. Yeah, I'm cool. And then literally a week after they had played, someone showed me. I was like, what is this? And they're like, this is Snarky Puppy. And I was like, all right, cool. We live, we learn, we live. But yeah, so I love that I'll finally get to watch them live.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've not seen them live and would cherish that. I think they're celebrating, what is it, 10 years since that iconic album, that name I can't remember right now.
Yeah. They're really snarky dog at this point. Oh, I'm just swinging away. We at the end of the year, it's burnout season. We just chill.
Burnout season.
We should just call this the big burn.
It's definitely burnout season, and previous silly end of year seasons sometimes can go quiet for me as a creative contractor, entrepreneur, business owner, all that sort of thing. And I'm quite glad that it's not this year. All those sort of last minute, the last minute client projects that come and go, can we get this done by the end of the year? And can we also get this done by the end of the year? And when are you going to use that thing? Oh, I don't know, but can we get it done by the end of the year?
A lot of budgets need a lot of acquittal.
That's it. Yeah. Yes. Even though we, run on tax years that land in some other months, there is some money that needs to get out the door by this time of year. That childlike kind of enthusiasm and hyping each other up and bouncing off each other. Do you think that is like when we sort of analyze and go like, how is this band able to create an album on the spot every night? Do you think that is like one of the essential ingredients?
Like encouragement?
Like that level, like kind of like, whoa, yeah, like fanning each other that much, and like I guess having each other's back when you like go down a weird path.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's all about risk and emotional risk in the same way of like vulnerability in conversation or relationship. There's a risk of like, everyone in their own space probably has the idea of like, what if my idea is bad?
Right.
So to try something and not just have other people be like, that's cool. But like, yo, like straight away that celebration and that support that comes into it, everyone becomes greater than the sum of the parts a bit because you feel encouraged to be larger. Perhaps like the tree inside the twig starts to kind of make a move. And I think when that happens collectively, it's just a celebration and there's not much space for fear because joy sort of fills up the space. And that's how I definitely think I work. Like I've always been like that in the bigger moments. Like I remember getting to freestyle in front of Dead Prez when they toured through. This was years ago.
Right.
And I expected to be terrified of that gig. But by the time it was happening and it was to a live band who was opening for Dead Prez, and I remember just hearing the music and there was just so much joy and there was so much love for hip hop in the room in general that I was like, oh, that's when I started to realize like, oh, I freestyle better under pressure, not because I am some Dave Goggins, like, yeah, you got to just work through it and create it. But it's just, if you just access that joy, it's not that there's not room for fear, but like, have you seen those memes lately of like babies gnawing on their parents and it's like attack 100, damage 0?
Okay.
It's like that. Like the fear is still 100, but damage is 0 because joy buffs you up. I'm speaking in RPG land because I've been playing Baldur's Gate. Buffs you up? Yeah, you know what I mean? 100. Yeah, you have unlocked inner joy, unconquerable. But no, there's seriously that power. And I think when that happens collectively, then it just becomes almost like I don't know, it's like when someone like tries on a new outfit, you're like, yo, what's all this? And you're like, oh, you like it? It's like that with your ideas. And then you get a bit braver and then you try. And then hopefully you experiment and push yourself or your ideas to the fringe of what you would think of. And then that creates more surprise and delight for everyone else who's maybe used to the style or flavor. Like when I start opening my mouth, people expect me to rap at a show.
Yeah.
But if I start singing or doing a spoken word for some reason, or, you know, I don't know. I just love the play of gratification or surprise or delay to our expectation and how that creates an experience. But when you do that collectively, that's what makes a successful night where you can like make an album in a night because everyone's playfully playing with each other's expectation.
I feel like some of those rhythms and notions like are also some of the kind of recipes or technical sort of technique approaches behind comedy as well.
Yeah.
And I do there's a lot of times I've seen you on stage where it's just super funny as well. Like, have you embraced that side of your work or artistic practice or experimentation?
As in like comedy?
Yeah. Have you sort of like, do you just like drop into it for like moments on stage, or have you like gone down that path a little?
I have officially started doing some stand-up comedy.
Okay. And
I've been kind of dabbling with it. I've taken a huge break. Like, I can't really say I'm currently doing it, but I was doing it for about a year and a half, like quite, you know, occasionally, maybe like a gig every 6 weeks kind of thing.
Okay.
And I've enjoyed it.
Nice.
I've enjoyed pushing it just because I love learning. I love, being on like that growth side of my comfort zone, but still within an area that interests me. Because I've always thought comedy and freestyle rap, they're like cousins who see each other at Christmas. You know what I mean? It's just that, because there's still timing. Actually, I did this as a bit when I was first starting out in comedy. I was like, there's so many similarities. It's timing, audience expectation, mental health crises used for creativity. Like, you know, there's all these similar things. So definitely I sought stand-up comedy for that. And I was also encouraged by champions of my life at the time. So shout outs. But also, I think with music, I just naturally get, I think the answer is actually really boring. I just get really excited. So in between songs, I'll just feel like, all right. And I'll just be silly because I also like the idea of any kind of night of music and improvisation, and like our songs can be quite serious or thematically heavy at times. And I like juxtaposing that with remembering that it's all kind of fun and it's play under the stars for a limited time only. So that's why I kind of feel, I guess, the need to joke, though some might call that like a trauma response. It's like, and now that we've rapped about slavery and symbolism of a tiger and the jungle, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Try to bring that back with a little bit of lighthearted laughter as well, because we need to laugh in the narratives that are still ongoing and all immersive, you know, laughter.
And it's that kind of tension release moment as well. It's like the little blow off valve.
100%. Yeah. I think for me, and I got so many questions for you. I'm so like surprised you've even alluded the opportunity for me to get into it until now. But I got you. I was just gonna say, like, one of my favorite film genres is like black comedy or dark comedy, because I love that every time you laugh, you cry a little, and every time you cry, you laugh a little in those genres, like in those films. And so I think really beautiful art invites you to do both at the same time.
Okay.
And I think that's actually really cool and not inappropriate or offensive, but actually appropriate to the ultimate absurdity, you know? Because it is. Like, when you think about it, now this might get me canceled, but let me just put it out there anyway, and we can edit it later. Slavery is a pickle. You know what I mean?
to get into, to explain, to...
it's a pickle that it happened.
Yeah.
It's a pickle to be happening to you. It's a pickle that it happened to you. Like my family's from Seychelles, which is a country that was formed by slave ships getting liberated by the French. And then they didn't know how to speak to them or where to send them back to. So they just went, you guys are all free here. And they dumped them on a tiny island.
Right.
And that over time, and then you had British colonization as well. But then that evolved into a country, which then, led to, but it's sort of a country with no historical culture because it's a blending pot of slaves.
Oh, and it was just
Yeah.
plonked there.
Yeah.
Whoop, there you go.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So it's like this giant stolen narrative that leads me to be here today, making art over time.
Right.
And I think that's what I mean when I'm like, it's a pickle.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
it's like, in a way, I'm glad I'm here. I'm glad I am who I am. I'm glad my parents are who they are. But I also inherently see the effects of that over time. And not just that story, but what that did and the history of the nation and then failed governments and failed revolutions and just the ongoing ripple effects of slavery, colonization, imperialism, all those things. Look at how we took a left turn. But all of that is so true. And also, you kind of have to laugh.
Right,
Because it's
yeah.
like, what? But we're on a planet. Why did that all happen? It's like, I don't know. I'm not articulating it the best, but there is always this inherent sense of silliness with relentless hope and pursuit of, peace and justice and freedom and all those absolutely pivotally fundamental things. There is always laughter for me as well.
Right.
And I think it's a coping mechanism, but it's
Yeah,
also just
absolutely.
because it's ridiculous. It's like, wait, what? Time exists? Stars? What? We're made of stars? And
Made
then
of
we
stars.
went, you do the thing, and I'm going to force you to do it. What happened? Like, why did that? Like, left turn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, yeah, power and domination are historical, of course. But
What's that, sir?
I was trying to put it like a little post-it afterthought, like, well, structures of power and domination and oppression are always historical and how many of the Western world has evolved. But, yeah, it's I don't know, it's still equally to me an incredible thing to be alive with all of those things being so true. Man, I read a great line and I'm just dancing around here because it's end of year burnout. Forgive my,
We're right in it.
ping pong brain. But it was a line from How to Go Mad Without Losing Your Mind. And it's this beautiful book around blackness and creativity and artistry and just history of everything. And there was a line that talks about in the act of that mass enslavement of so much of Africa, in the particularly the kind of African American narrative, and that act of slavery being it was so huge and such a massive act that it erases the pastness of history.
Erases the pastness.
It erases the pastness of history. It's this great line. And I'm saying it without the context of the whole chapter that
Right.
paints what that meant and how, for slaves that were on board those ships after they had been taken from their homeland, they were neither home, but they also did not know where they were going. And they were literally in this in-between of nothingness. There was a nothingness to that experience and a reduction of your identity of, well, what is life? What? And it's this huge passage about that. But that line stood out to me. And so what I was saying is I laugh amidst the incomprehensible heaviness of those massive historical events. I was going to say beats like it's a film. Those beats of human
Yeah.
history that are so big, they erase the pastness because we still live in the ripple of it.
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
ongoingness of it.
Right.
And I am who I am, and I have my sense of humor and dark humor because of who my dad is who he is because of the trauma of political disruption and different traumas from different things that all are tied to that same historical story unfolding over time. And it's crazy when you really hold space for it. But at the same time, we are made of star stuff. And we can create.
Yeah.
And we can connect and
Yeah.
love each other and find friendship and vulnerability. And in the worst of circumstances, still laugh
Yes.
and have a moment of kindness that no one can ever touch.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, you can just send kindness no matter what. You can send kindness to your oppressor. Whether they know it or not, whether they know of their role in that oppression or not, you can send kindness out. It's crazy. I'm really going deep, and I have so many questions for you. So I'm just gonna just gonna hit the brakes on my end for a second. Thank you for indulging in that whole monologue of, like dancing on the cliff of cancel. Like just saying, when I said slavery is a pickle, I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to give some context.
Yeah. Like, are we going down the fermentation angle here? Like,
Totally. Oh, I remember I had this bit in my old comedy routine where I was talking about just this whole idea of where Seychelles originates from and how I exist, because at some point in our family history, a slave plantation owner got in trouble for misconduct with a slave.
Oh, right.
Like HR, they got in trouble with HR, and everyone's like barely laughing, kind of like, "Ooh, why are you mentioning that?" And I was like, guys, this is just jokes. There was no HR. Like, it's this whole thing, Anyway, all that to say, here we are. Can I ask you some questions?
Yeah.
Just to hard pivot away from just the entrenchment of all of the darkest parts of history. Okay. I don't even know. I've been waiting to have a chat with you, and I love that it's finally happening once again while mics are rolling. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a general experiential question and then so many others. But for you, what has been one of your most meaningful experiences with art, and why? And that can be live music experience, or it could be film, or it could be anything that you would yourself put in the category of art. Something that's been meaningful to you, and why? Because in that, I'll hopefully get to see a little data splatter of who you are.
Okay. So I had a previous touring hat as a solo live vocal looping musician. Yes. And it was a hip-hop act with a persona, Larry T. Hill. And I kind of had to go as a persona and go as this secret thing on SoundCloud to sort of reinvent myself and do that. There was just something inside me that I just needed to do. I need to figure out how to do it, and I need to do it away from my upbringing in Sydney. So I was doing it sort of on the road and rural places. And there was initially some lighter tunes about riding a bike on the highway or hitchhiking or that kind of thing. But then I started writing this piece that was just going straight into casual racism with a lot of verbatim lines of things that had been said to me. And the tune was titled FAQ. And when I was developing it and writing it, it was imbuing all this spoken word energy and attitude and things and that sort of stuff into it. And it was already on my mind from what we were talking about just before, but I thought I was putting so much seriousness and heaviness and all this, and I was like, oh, this is going to be I'm going to switch it up on people. This is going to be my serious tune. And I was also playing it for the first time in Mbuntu Alice Springs, Central Australia, for my first time, talking about casual racism in what very much to me at the time, and potentially still is, our best shot at an apartheid town, right? And I was, played the gig and played the tune, and dropping into accents and impressions and everything. And then I got to what I thought the heavy parts were, and then even to white fellas in the room, there was laughter.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, right. So I can, okay, cool. I can talk about casual racism to the kinds of people that I experience it from, and make them laugh, and maybe get them to think about it on the way home. I think that whole process of kind of making this over months and months and months and can I do it? Can I do it? And then finally doing it, and then almost slowly getting used to this. I was like, oh, okay, this is a funny tune. All right, I wasn't expecting that. I think that was just unexpected, but also a kind of fun way to take the power back, because I didn't know if I was going to be leaving that pub in a stretcher that night or not.
Wow, what a twist.
Yes. I think that's my what I went straight for when you asked that one.
That is great. I knew 0% of what you just shared already. Isn't that insane that I didn't know anything? The looping, the whole musical thing. I'm like, I did the looping vocals.
Oh, really?
Why have we never bonded about
shit.
that? RC 505, baby.
Yeah, that's the one I graduated to after starting with like a boomerang looper.
So cool.
Yeah.
Wow, what an experience. And the bravery to do that kind of performance in that context, in that place. And then the payoff of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I can see how that would stick with a brother.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now, what does your creative practice look like? Because you mentioned this, or you're like, oh yeah, I was on set here. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, how much do we maybe have in common? What's going on? What is the spectrum of your creative practice that you're happy to share?
So I was, I started that project in Australia when I was hitchhiking around, learning a bunch about permaculture and organic farming, and also just I just completely packed down my life in on Gadigal in Sydney, and I just started going over to Naarm and then going a bit further and then to Central Australia and then Darwin, and kind of like had a seasonal loop for 5 years, and then it was almost like I was building up momentum, sort of going round and round and round to eventually like slingshot myself back towards Sri Lanka. And I had lots of adventures continuing that, and like music performance and a bit of DJing on the side was the core part of my profession for a bunch of my time in South Asia, and got to sort of advance that and advance my expectations about, like, you know, when I was starting out, I would sort of like hitch to a festival and just like try and get a spot on stage, and like Woodford one year, but when I came back, it's kind of like, no, I'm like a legit artist now. I have fees. I've got a writer. I've got a tech thing, and it was 2019, and I was seeing brown folks on festival lineups, and I was like, you know, El Fresh the Lion, Eka Vandal, like, it's like, oh, cool, like, maybe now it's time. You know, been hanging out for a bit.
It's trending.
Maybe now it's maybe now I can get in, and apart from a sort of like offshoot side of the post Dark Mofo Festival little side gig I was able to get down in Hobart, nothing was really biting back on that festival application front. And so I had sort of reignited my film profession off to the side while still in Sri Lanka. And I had definitely noted the kind of rates that I was able to do with film compared to musical performance. And then just after, just like all these applications and things weren't really flowing here. I might have put like, I don't know, 6 months or more into those, and nothing was really biting. And I just sort of thought, oh, you know, I'll just take off this performer hat for a bit and just double down on film and podcasts and my own business, and just sort of put that to sleep for a bit, put it on ice. Didn't know what I was going to do. It took a while to actually sell the looper, the 505, and but did eventually. And a little bit of it has sort of come out through DJing, but it doesn't. DJing was never that serious to me. It was always just like this sort of fun little thing off to the side. It's very, very fun to just like do it on a bike and do these pedal party things, but still it's not quite the outlet. And it is very fun that we got to talk about stand-up comedy, because after threatening for quite some time, I did get to play around with it at my recent birthday party.
Huge.
And I was definitely channeling you there, because I didn't write my bits, and had a few land, which is very, very, very fun to experience. And of course, like the warmest environment being around. You got a taste for blood. Yes. Yes. And yeah, I've like even got a creativity accountability partner, Erica, who's a dancer. So she's trying to get some of her freestyle. She's trying to get some of her freestyle dance stuff going, and I got my comedy things. And I was just telling her excitedly the other day, after, like, you know, we sort of like drop out of that chat with each other, because both of us are just like super busy with our general creative work. But yeah, I was just excitedly telling her that in February I have registered for Raw Comedy. So even though like the competition structure, like it's a bit naff. I was part of a DJ comp like a year or two ago, and it's like but it actually I did have to look back at it and go like, oh, it actually made me do the thing, and it gave me a deadline. So I think that sort of structure that I do respond to, and I do kind of I guess rise to occasions. So sort of loosely messaging people on Insta to try and like go to a comedy open mic, that wasn't really landing anywhere, and I wasn't really consistent with that. So I think I think that is a part of where my creativity is going, but also spaces like this, like
so dope.
like creating and maintaining, hosting spaces like this, just sort of seeing little gaps, I guess. Like it's like, oh, what isn't there? Like, maybe we can have a platform for underrepresented folks, so that kind of thing.
So you're saying you are involved in the intersections of music creativity, film creativity, comedy, and social justice. Brother! It's crazy.
Yeah.
So many similarities and resonances, even though they look and have had different forms and stories. But also with the comedy bit, are you on the comedy group for Brisbane? Like it's like a Facebook group?
I'm not on Facebook. Yes, I'm not in any.
Okay, well, we're going to get you on Facebook.
Okay.
I'll add you to that. And then you can apply for the Sit Down Comedy Club open mics there. They post their forms up, and that's how they get their roster going.
That's how things.
Yeah. There's always it's a little gatekeepy if you don't know. But the second you know, it's actually really open.
Right.
Yeah.
I've even been thinking about like because I'm definitely a comedy enthusiast, and I've go to shows when I can, and I there's a few folks that I like follow quite intensely, and I just like kind of like just been nerding out on comedy for a bit. But I feel like even as like someone to just go and see shows, like it's a little bit hard to sort of like get it. It's like, oh, do I go to that club, or is it on this night? Oh, I don't know. And part of me's been thinking of like having a little, I don't know, like here's the Brizzy comedy guide, but I guess it's always changing.
I think that exists.
It exists?
I think that was something that existed because I saw it posted about on that same group, and it was just some legend who had taken the time, but it keeps evolving for sure. So I don't know if they've kept it up to date. I've been out the scene for half a year.
Okay.
But yeah, we're going to get you plugged in. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Good on you for taking that step as well. How good. I always think of this stuff as what if hunting. Like seeing someone engage in the act of going, you know what are the main what ifs on the periphery of my interest, or like where's my intuition leading me? So you, towards your birthday, being like, oh, comedy, what if I dipped my toes in and started like doing, and then you go hunting. Take that shotgun off the wall, head out into the forest, and you get after that what if.
Okay.
And like, look at you go. Because I think, all those quotes about like, I can live with failure, but I can't live with regrets of not trying, or that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's sort of the same genre. It's like that what if, that's a huge active meaning that you can engage in. Because it's who you are. Like those little sparks of, oh, but what if I did some comment? Oh, what it's like you got to honor those questions. It's like a little aura of curiosity, And I think when you start answering it, however it goes, step 1 on that snakes and ladder board is going to feel better than square 99 of something that isn't you.
Right. Yeah.
And so many people are just scared of square 1 energy, so they never actually step onto the boards of their what ifs. But the second you do, you're like, oh my God, square 1 feels way better here.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
Bombing at a comedy show feels way better than crushing that finance update in the job that you got for safety that you should have probably left 5 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I also feel like that kind of it, like I was trying to, like with this space here, I'm just trying to get numbers on the board. I'm just trying to like get the next one done and the next one done. And like you and I were sharing about kind of like self-doubts what we both having earlier today, which is just funny. But I think I needed to allow myself some grace in terms of like, I might be producing like client podcasts with with journalists, with speakers, with authors, people that are really proficient at, sitting in this chair right here. But for myself, I just need to let myself just get, there's a YouTuber I follow, Ali Abdal. I think his 3-step process is like, get going. Number 1, get going. Number 2, get good. Number 3, get smart.
Hey.
And so like not race into any one of those 3 things before.
I like
so
that.
yeah, I like it sort of echoes what you were getting into there on the snakes and ladders as well. It's just like, just want to get going, and I just want to chase this thing, and like as you, if you're looking at the visual version of this, you might see there's like, the change of scenery, a little mic added here, a little small change here and there, and just like this little incremental kind of thing of just this iterative approach without trying to like jump to number 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, I want to get the perfect backdrop and like I want to get 6 cameras and a crew. It's like no, let's just start here.
100%.
And I went through this process recently. There was uncle in the community that was kind of reaching out through his partner of like, he's got a community radio background, but was wanting to get a podcast started, and then sent me a little screenshot of like a Temu kind of podcast kit, and I was like looking at the price tag and like, whoa, okay, I didn't know things went that low. Okay, but then I went around and was like, okay, before we get going in the gear, let's just like map this out. It's like, what are the stories? Who's the audience? Where's it going? How's it going to get there? And then like, how are we going to capture it? And then I was like, oh, cool. There's a history of like musicians and behind the scenes sort of thing. And it's like, okay, cool. And you got these skills from radio. And actually there's like this huge Facebook group of like fans of these kind of music genres. So like we've got that audience. And then I was thinking about, okay, cool. Then we just need to figure out recording and uploading. And then I just had this like sort of moment of like, hang on. We could just like put some clip mics on and just go Facebook Live. There's no editing. And that kind of like draws that loop to get, and that's like, for him, I think that's like the get going. It's like, let's just get going and then figure out those next bits later. So I do like to work on things with that kind of approach. I really love those little
That's
steps.
fire, man. It's powerful too. I always think like getting your, I'll say, stuff together feels a lot more empowering and alive than having your stuff together.
Yeah.
In a way. You know what I mean? Because just think about all the things that you have together right now that you don't even think about them. You're like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not addicted to crack. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, I'm so glad I assume I'm not in debt with the Italian mafia somehow. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many things that you have together that is someone else's goals in that character, in that category to be where you are. And you never think twice about it. All we focus on, survival, biology, whatever it is, constant conditioning of the social media algorithm. We see our lack and like, oh, I can't wait to get to 6 cameras. Or like, oh, you see the lack. It's easy to see the lack, but the joy in just step 1 of any process of getting it together and getting going.
Yes.
And again, Baldur's Gate, RPG brain on, playing the game. Not the capitalistic game. I'm not talking about it in the grind hashtag, late capitalism is fine for everyone. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like what you just shared echoes that whole, I don't know, it's really a mythological hero story. It's like the process, the journey of that feels so much more rewarding than you can ever imagine. But when you start, how good's that feeling, right? I remember seeing you go for the comedy bits at your birthday and we barely knew each other. Yeah. Like I remember being there going like, he's how old? Like I was so shook. I'm not even going to, spoilers. You got to have a personal conversation to find out. But, it's just like, I remember being in the crowd like, yes, he's going for it. Like he's dipping the toes and let's get it. And it was great. It was also the most wholesome birthday moment of any party I've seen lately. It was beautiful. But yeah, so good. And I feel maybe this is a segue of some sort. It's not really. I'm kind of hard transferring over to this.
That's okay.
But
we can do that.
In the spirit of us both sharing that we had doubts and like self-doubts and intrusive thoughts about like, oh, are we going to be interesting enough or articulate enough or like whatever it is at this end of year kind of burnout time. it kind of opens up. I really appreciate that we can talk about that. Like when you mentioned that, it made me appreciate it. And then it made me remember the chats around men's health, mental health, vulnerability, masculine vulnerability, or just human vulnerability, and its presence, or perhaps not as often presence in men's relationships, and friendship, and spaces, and all of that, which just came around when you were sharing. I was like, oh, like a bit of a gratitude point with the openness that, as we are still essentially getting to know each other properly. Like I didn't even know any of your musical background. Let's be real. But I love that there's that openness, which I appreciate straight away.
Absolutely.
Brother factor aside, you know what I'm saying? Like, we all navigating the system. But what are your thoughts on how do you see the state of kind of vulnerability in the men in your environments, in the world around you? Because obviously we can comment on the world at large, but that's just our lens based on our immediate experiences generally, right?
Yeah.
What's your relationship? Let me ask you this. Let's start here. What's your relationship like with vulnerability?
With vulnerability?
It's actually super personal to me. Sorry.
No, and these, I think these are the, these are the spaces for it. These sort of long form, deep, one-to-one, in-person kind of spaces. I think they're the ones where I feel more comfortable, and like also when there's a structure around it. Like I have this weirdness of like with artists, like I would, and with you as well, like I have preferred to have our first big conversation like in this space. It's always captured, and we don't like lose any of those little things, and then once that is like done, then we can go on with being friends. Because I'm like an idiot. I was like
gassy earlier, and then just start talking all the the back's starting to go like.
Absolutely, but I think it's something that I think in the past I've classically done that kind of like leaning into partners like women to get into those vulnerable spaces, because so many women are much more comfortable getting in touch with those levels of vulnerability. And I've appreciated that over the last however many years of like getting into different forms of talking and movement therapy, kind of found some of those spaces in my own way, and really noticing, like say in the therapy space, when there is cultural safety in that space, which is a new experience with a culturally diverse background therapist for me. I've noticed that in terms of vulnerability and sharing, like I feel like I can go, and and similar sort of like dynamic here, when you see yourself reflected, like you can go into those spaces sooner, and there can be so much that you don't even need to sort of say or check in on.
Slavery is a pickle, you say. Like, just how off the rails that could have gone. But no, I hear you. Absolutely. There's already 1,000 things that are said, understood, agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
And there was just a moment, like I had a really close friend just share with me that he'd had like just a super rough day, and like that was something that he doesn't usually share with people. So I was just so like grateful to like hold that space and kind of have that kind of communication between two men. But something that when you ask me about vulnerability, that I think of is like that finding ways to model that in groups of men as well, and that sort of touches on this desire, this thing. I feel like if I keep voicing it enough, I'll get closer to it. But yeah, thinking of like of trying to bring together that cultural space of cultural safety with a men's group as well. And,
yeah, absolutely. It's I don't know, it's like a thing of legend for me. I'm like, wow, like just hangs with a group of culturally diverse men who can make space and time to be doing that already. Just that, no vulnerability necessarily, just time. What a dream. Because then you could just sit in the silent sauna of lived experiences.
Yeah.
You know, like just like, oh, we all know what that feels like, or what that can mean, or what this little, I don't know, basketball, whatever it could be. Let alone when you start sharing stories, opening up, and that whole axis of life goes vertical and the depth comes into it, and just the absolute like liberation that you feel, just being like, oh, yeah, I feel that pain, or I understand what it means to have a parent or a homeland or a cultural story that is entrenched in these similar phenomenon and pickles. You know, it's powerful because it plays so much of a role in the day to day. That's cool. I've been thinking about this for a while, and like how to create those spaces more, because I'm similar in the way that I grew up with sisters,
right, and
a mum who was very happy that she was a child psychologist, so she was always like kind of low-key just checking in and like creating that conversational space.
Yeah.
And to be fair, my dad would talk a lot as well. But if we're all being real, Lou, if we're being real, it's a lot of talk. You know, it's a lot of talking at you rather than like space holding for vulnerability some of the time, because men are unfamiliar with that.
Yeah.
Like creating space and holding space for that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the coolest things to experience, even still for me, is this kind of like, oh, we're just creating a space for it. Like no one even needs to become vulnerable straight away, but just creating a space for it, asking a question about what's something that's been meaningful to you. Just that invitation for vulnerability in some way. And you see guys like, oh, geez, I don't know. And it's like, it's unfamiliar. Like it's not a common space to be invited into by another man, at least. And there's so much joy there. And I remember I did it with, I'll keep him anonymous, because even if I say the role that he plays in my life, it'll kind of be a bit of a spoiler. So I'll just say someone who I've known for a while, but haven't had the opportunity or made the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with one-on-one, because we're always in group settings.
Right.
And we sat down one-on-one, and I started to ask questions like, can you just tell me a story? Like, because we've just kind of met and we hang and we joke and we reference all pop culture all the time, but we haven't really like heard each other's stories. Like, what got you to do this? And at some point, I remember there was just this moment where he was like, I've actually never shared my story with anyone before.
Oh.
And I was like shook as a man, as a human, as a documentary like filmmaker. I was like, we're watching the birth of a story's articulation. Like, it was this incredible thing of like, we really don't have that many spaces that we create for each other as men. And yeah, it's an interesting time, I think, in the world, because the second like you say men's group, some people are like, yo, whoa, what? And they think you mean like, you know, protesting Australia for the white man, or like some crazy, like,
it's like
some right-wing hectic energy kicking off. And it's like, no. Just like a space to go, hey, bro, how you doing? Without the person having to be a role for anyone in their life or any kind of people in their life that they're used to having to perform a role for. Yeah, it's interesting. I have more questions than answers on it, but yeah.
Have you had some experiences with those spaces?
I have started a men's group of sorts, and it wasn't intentional. I remember I was putting the feelers out over social media. I was trying to gauge, like, I had for a while been chatting with girlfriends who had women's circles or creative women's writer circles, and they were doing all these cool things. Shout outs to Melbourne and just the amount of hustle for that kind of stuff. Also, there's a lot of Brisbane migrants looking for community, so they're all like, what if we start a circle? You know, like, but I was hearing all these stories, and it just sounded like the most awesome time of just like, wow, just a space for sharing, of like holding space for people's joys, pains, rites of passage moments, career changes, or like whatever's going on in their lives, just holding that space. And I was like, I feel like I want to be at something like that. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
But I also, relative to my life, which I think as a gigging musician, you do get to meet a lot more people than a lawyer who works in an office with a limited number of people as your day in, day out full-time gig. Like, I'm in different spaces, I'm having chats with different people. Inherently, the creative industries have a lot more open, conversational type people. And in all of those journeys, I hadn't come across anything like that. I hadn't heard of an artist's kind of, circle or like group for supporting the journey, let alone a men's circle or men's group. And so I was just putting the question out there, like, who would be interested in something like that? What would the barriers be? Because I've always thought there's intrinsic barriers and extrinsic barriers. So if you make it like I don't know, we're all going to get together and have chicken wings. Then it's like, well, then, all right, you can need vegan options. And you don't want it to cost people money because then, men who potentially need that space will create all kinds of excuses like, well, I ain't going to spend money that I don't have to spend. So that's why I'm not going, Janice. You know what I mean? Like, but I was like, well, we could all just walk. But I'm like, who wants to do that initially? Like, hey, John, do you want to come with me to my men's circle that walks? It's like, it just feels culty and weird. You know what I mean? So I was like, the pin kind of got put in it until one time I was catching up with a friend and we like playing pool. And so we went to the pool hall and he was like, oh, my mate, John Smith is free. These are not real names if you haven't worked that out. And he's like, do you mind if Johnny comes along? And I was just like, yeah, of course, no worries. And just hadn't thought much of it. But I think something just happened. This is like months after I'd initially thought about a men's circle or anything. And that night, I think we played one game of pool for 3 hours.
Right.
Because we were just holding the cues and everyone was just in a place of like, not breaking point, but like you know what? If you ask me how I'm going, I got to give you the honest answer. You know, when you hit that moment. And then we went, at one point, I think I made the joke of we just had some beautiful discussion or reflection of, responding to a vulnerable share. I was like, oh, we just hit men's group status. And they were like, yo. And then we just like casually dubbed it like men's group at the pool hall. And then it just became a thing where they started to invite other friends who were going through it or just generally keen for connection. Yeah. And then we would just do that. So it's the closest thing, but it's still limited. It's like just a handful. And then we recently went for a big city walk. And I was like, yo,
cool.
healthy.
You did get the walk going.
Got the active hangs going. And it was the best because it was free. And we didn't have to, when you chat at a pool hall for 3 hours playing one game of pool, there is this like underlying,
you're on the clock.
My Creole bargain brain is like, this is terrible value. Like, you know what I mean? Like this cost per game is insane. So, yeah, just trying to navigate that now. And it's not the answer, I don't think, because maybe a walking group or something. I know I've heard about others that exist in like parks where they come together and have like a big sausage sizzle, that kind of stuff. That's very like, it just seems so Aussie. Like big sausage sizzle in the park and Bunnings snag. And, you know?
I've heard of other, what is it? There's like, there's a tough guy book club or something that it's like it's playing on that concept, but
cool.
but it tends to meet at just bars and pubs and that sort of thing. So it does, I guess, somewhat center the drinking, or it goes for this sort of classic kind of space, which brings its own.
There's
stuff.
still a consumption thing somewhere, and I think we can't talk about this whole thing without addressing the reality that we are in an era where there's the least free time that people have felt in terms of cost of living and the pressure to not go out and do stuff or just not. I mean, now 50 cent fares helps that a little bit. Actually quite a lot. But like between time and then just the lack of third spaces where you don't need to spend money to be in a space and play that consumption role. It's actually such realistic, such influencing factors on how much you can just get a project going, like a group or a community building happening without that kind of, being centric to some kind of bar or experience or sport, but everyone has to pay for this or that, or like there's always barriers, you know? So I guess I'm trying to still work out what the non-barrier version would look like. And I guess that could just be like kicking a soccer ball around. But even doing that and playing basketball, that just inherently takes over, and you just end up being like, let's go, and people are dunking, and it's like there's not really that same, so how are you doing? Because men will kind of then hyper focus on a task rather than the connection part. So I don't know, have you seen all these memes about like raw dogging, where everyone's just like, just raw dogged a 2-hour drive, no phone, no memes, no scrolling, just thinking with the thoughts, just drove with the thoughts, like that whole idea. You thought I was taking a different direction.
I was curious to see which version of the raw dog, but I think, I can relate.
And I think that's like becoming more of a thing of like, maybe you could have like the raw dog and men's group where it's like, we just meet up, look each other in the eyes and share. It's like, but are you playing cards? It's like, no activity, just sit or stand and share. Like maybe there's more. I mean,
it could even be like, phones aside or phone free space, because that's the reference, right? For the
raw. The no phonies, just homies or something like that.
Right. Like
it's cool if it rhymes. Everyone can enjoy that.
Definitely.
But yeah, so I don't know. I don't. That's my experience. It was the most long-winded possible response to that initial question. But yeah, I still think there's opportunity around the communities that I'm in, and I especially think men of culturally diverse background have a whole space and need there, but also artists.
Yeah.
And like genuinely artists and musicians in this era where so much of the infrastructure of music is kind of declining or shrinking, or it feels like it's kind of this like low-key systemic move to push out working class opportunities and have it more be big
elitist thing,
duopoly run industrial structures, and you got to put out 30 pieces of TikTok a day attached to every song if you want to try get discovered. That kind of industrial component, just weighing people down from having the chance to do music as their full-time thing, or originals music, I should say. I just want to like check in with so many artists and be like, how are you going? How are you doing? How do you feel about this? Where are you finding your hope? What do you find the most discouraging? Like, let's ventilate and resonate, but let's also talk about hope, because there's so much going on.
That reminds me of like that time in 2019 where I just sort of like took off the hat and took off the artist cloak and just sort of just breathed, just took a moment. And I just realized that I'd been like carrying this anxiety and this sort of, comparison thief of joy thing constantly, that like whenever I'd see another musician doing a gig or something, there was like this inherent sort of like undercurrent of comparison. It's like, oh shit, I need to be doing gigs. Like, like just this that I just like had for like 5-7 years of like sort of touring that project. And that was one thing that I was grateful for, as well as like, choosing to take a break before COVID made everyone take a break. Those two things were quite timely in a sense, and I was very curious to notice it was very interesting to notice the sort of the comparison cloak, or whatever this thing was that I've been carrying.
I like cloak. That's nice, because it implies you can kind of just gently take it off. That's cool. Comparison cloak. Yeah, I see a lot of musicians, I will say, get into that place of comparison, especially down in Melbourne, I guess, where it's a bit more of like a ecosystem, and there's higher population, higher amounts of drummers in the space, or bass players in the space, or this or that.
Right.
Everyone's a bit more like, if you're like, your gig is taken away from my opportunity, that sort of thing. I just think, I mean, for so many obvious reasons, it's not a healthy mindset, but it's so good when people can find whatever way that they get there, when they can find a place of, it's just me, my creative practice, and then a career is a holistic thing that can involve much more than my music.
So previously, when you were at this table, you were talking to Huda about, people throwing out the term genius, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Some people would almost expect or project that if they see a creative or an artist that has that level of skill, that must be just like what they're doing, and surely it's just a straight road from here to full-time success and career and all these things. how's your journey and connection been to that sort of narrative?
Whoa, it's a pretty big question in a way. Hey, I have a whole bit. So one of the things that I do is I talk with students or community groups or whatever. I do like careers kind of keynotes. That's part of my day job sort of focus. And I blended that with my creative industries background. So I'll do chats. And one of the themes of one of those chats that I give with some young audiences is why I quit my dream job. And it's a nice little hooky title. But really what it's just talking about is one of the fundamental aspects of kind of literacies in career development, which is recognizing that change is constant. We change internally, but also the external world is going to keep changing. Technology, opportunities, labor markets, landscapes, industries, all that stuff. So for me, in that context of my musical kind of creative practice as a freestyler, I remember a few years ago, I got this call at the start of the year. I was working my day job, I was doing gigs, I was in BULLHORN, and then I got this call to tour with a hip hop circus. And that I just got the call like 2 weeks before this like world tour was going to start. And shout outs to Gene, the director of the company that ran that show. And he was like, hey man, we've had one of the roles in the circus is going on a television show or doing some thing this year and is unavailable for the tour. Would you like to join and be paid this much and have your flights and accom covered as we do this world tour, and
That's
you'll have a
360
salary.
All-Stars, is it?
That was 360 All-Stars. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, are we naming names? We don't know. I don't know. He'd probably enjoy the promotion. But and I remember just being like, okay. And then I was like, oh damn, salary and flights and accom provided, and I get to rap as my job, and it's like, what are the hours like? It's like, well, the show's 1 hour, so it would be like an hour a day. I'm like, yeah, you gonna pay me a salary to work an hour a day freestyling? Like, it was the ultimate like, brother, we made it. Like just this feeling of like, whoa. And so also because it scared the living daylights out of me at the start of the year to fathom leaving everything I knew and doing this big trip and doing a huge show that required live looping and rapping and beatbox, all that stuff.
Oh, right.
I said yes to it. And then long story short, did the training, got into it, was extremely nervous for our first run at Adelaide Fringe, and then learnt it over time. And then we went around Australia, went through Asia. And then by the time we got to Edinburgh Fringe in Scotland, we had done a show every day for a month. And it was getting, I think this was around August, September area. But I remember being like, I've learnt it now and it doesn't scare me. The fear part had gone. I loved the novelty of seeing the world and traveling all these cool places and meeting all these other crazy performers. It was just this massive like roller coaster of a year of just like reading a really interesting book. But I realized about myself in that time, I was starting to feel a little bit empty about it all. And I realized if I'd said yes, like I think we were about to go to like New York Broadway and do like a whole run in America and do this and that. And I was like, this is all cool. And to all my friends back home, I was getting all these messages from like high school friends, like, we just saw you on like a television thing on Sunrise or this or that. Like, wow, come if you're freestyling full time, you made it. Wow.
Yeah.
And I was just like, who would have thought freestyle rap out of Brisbane, Australia could have become a job,
Yeah.
But I quit. I quit around Edinburgh because I remember having this big reflection of if I stay another year, it'll be essentially like a paid holiday. Because for my craft, it's nowhere as challenging as these break dancers or like BMX stunt professionals who have to do really technical things or else they can hurt themselves. I can only hurt myself socially, which I'm fine with. And so it was really like this epiphany of like, oh, like if I stay, I'll look like I made it and I'll be having a fun time traveling essentially on a paid holiday, it felt like.
Yeah.
But I will actually become critically depressed in time because I will be not living into my values and I will not be doing what to me was like a call for more meaningful work. And in my career, that's been like social intervention stuff. And then I basically, had to step away from that, which looked like to people who thought I had made it rapping full time, not a failure, but like a regression of some sort. Like, oh, you're not doing that show anymore. Oh, you're back working in Brisbane. Like, but I came back and I started working again in my kind of widening participation kind of career in the higher education space, I started doing my Roman MC stuff with schools and youth justice and all these social intervention things that were filling my cup with all these meaningful engagements. And I also started Life on Earth. And all of a sudden, the reasoning of, oh, well, if I don't freestyle to tour the world full time in novel places and hotels, rapping novelly, why do I do it? And it was like, oh, because I don't want to rap about someone juggling basketballs as the full scope of my creative practice. Yes. Shout outs to Gene and like the whole show. Like it's crazy performers doing amazing things. Yeah. But for me and my attraction to the creative practice of it, it's the whole legacy of hip hop. Like let's say something real about our experience, about our feelings, about the world, about the stories that we're a part of, the stories that we want to tell, the stories that are being told about us, all kinds of stuff. And that led me to, start Life on Earth, lean into vulnerability and challenge the technical freestyling part at the same time. And then lo and behold, quit a dream job and unlocked a chapter where literally every show has a moment that feels like a dream. And I go, I cannot believe this gets to be a part of my life story. Like no one would ever believe me. If I could articulate what it feels like on the inside to the outside, no one would believe me. It just genuinely feels like, oh, I've like entered some other stage of life where you just get these magical, unreal experiences with how it feels to be in the intersection of improvisation like that. Yeah. I just love it. So all of that is the response to, what it means to be like, oh, you can freestyle, so that must be your full-time thing. It's like it joyfully is not my full-time thing anymore. But it is a deep, fundamental part of my joy. Yeah.
With that centering joy in your practice, but also your the Roman MC as a facilitator out in schools, that kind of thing. I got a small taste of that. We were talking about Yonder Festival before, but a kind of cousin of Yonder is Jungle Love. I was going to say Love Jungle for a second.
Love the jungle.
I think I'm pretty sure I must have seen. Did you guys perform in the round at that one?
Life on Earth, yes.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing that I caught the tail end of that I wish I experienced was a group of people sort of entranced in this joy and hyped up confidence space at the tail end of your workshop.
Yes.
Where you'd just like pumped so much enthusiasm and encouragement and skills and techniques into them that there was this sort of like fearless joy, like just beaming out. And I was just like hovering nearby, just going like, what is this stuff? What's going on here?
So good.
What's that process like in people's like kind of, is it like a transformation they go through in those spaces?
Honestly, the easiest way to answer it is some of the best feedback I ever got was from a workshop I did at Island Vibe Festival on Stradbroke.
Yeah.
And I remember it was a friend of mine. Anyway, I don't know if she would want her name said, so I'll just say she gave me this awesome quote, which was, it's such a nice little thing for a website, which I absolutely have it on now. And it was just, she was like, it was like a high ropes course without having to leave the ground. And it just said it all. Ooh. Because people go from a place of, oh, there's no way I'm going to freestyle rap. Like if a friend brings you to a workshop, I mean, at a music festival, people are pretty excited. Yeah. If they've seen me freestyle rap, they're like, oh, I want to know how he does that or learn. But if you don't have context for it and you come into a space and I'm like, all right, so you guys are going to freestyle rap. People are like, oh, well, no, I'm not actually, because that's terrifying. You know, public speaking is still such a pervasive fear of people. And then you add rap and musicality to it and people are like, oh, no. And so if I've done my job well and you scaffold that process well, you see people it's less about learning how to rap and it's more about reframing yourself, reframing what you're capable of and understanding that it's really just wrangling and surfing discomfort and converting that into excitement and literally like brain fuel to propel an authentic story. But damn, that sounded like a good pitch. I was like, I hope you're recording that. No, we are. But it's like, that's what you see people arrive on the other side of. It's like, oh, I never realized like that I had that much bravery in me And you just need to create the right conditions, the setups for success, and then people surprise themselves. But they surprise me as well. And often when I do workshops in community, the parent of the young 14-year-old who they brought along, like, oh no, this is more for Oliver. He likes rapping and stuff. It's the parent or the mom who's there like, my name's Janice.
Oh,
I didn't plan this.
yeah.
I'm rocking planets. And everyone's like, go, go, go. And there's just this insane amount of joy and excitement. And and that's why I started doing what I do now as like a professional freelance thing. Because I was like, there are so many transformative moments happening for people personally, but also like parent to child or even grandparent, parent, child, intergenerational, intercultural. I was like, yo, I got to keep pulling at this thread. And so I like gave it a website and gave it a logo. And then I've just been kind of letting it organically move.
Yeah.
But it's been the most rewarding thing to back myself on because I've just constantly been amazed at how people show up for themselves. It's really genuinely the coolest thing. It's so enjoyable. But it's a transformation, but it's like they already had it. It's really just encouragement in a facilitation. That's it. And of course, a bit of novelty. You got to win people over and be able to freestyle to begin with. I love it if I can.
It's such a profound thing for people to experience. And you were touching on the surprises there and in the festival context. And it makes me think of a moment of surprise that I had at a music festival, which also was quite a special music festival because it had a lot of Pacifica and Island and African diaspora folks there.
Oof.
And
I already know the one you're talking about.
I was heading along. It was like my first year, and there was a prominent reggae artist that a few of us had followed for some time, and I did have some a little bit of sneaky side info about that. I would see a couple of familiar folks in the dance crew, and so. Some friends and I are like standing at the GA barrier, watching the stage and just like looking at the spectacle that it is to see Coffee perform with all these dancers and a bunch of them that we knew, and we're just sort of like witnessing the show. And of course, like you think Coffee's like maybe North American based or something like that. So there's this like DJ hype man with a North American sort of accent. And I'm like, yeah, cool, like going on. Then he pops up on the screen, and then my friend goes, hey, that's Roman.
Yeah. Like, hold on, bruh. Hold on.
How did that happen?
Oh man, that was such a fun experience. Hey, I love that. I love that. That's like, it was like, man, this guy's. Wait a second. No, I just got the call. I think Coffee's team connected with an Australian team to source a bunch of their like props, dance crew, or like their kind of like the agencies in charge of that. And yeah, I literally just got like what appeared initially to be a very spam message on WhatsApp.
Oh, right.
It's just like, hey Roman, you still rapping or something like that. The most unassuming, most casual thing. I was like, yo. I love me a DM when it's not absolute. Even if it's spam, I'm like, why are you doing this? What's the situation like? Why did you cave into this kind of lifestyle? But when it's not spam, I'm like, yo, what's up? What you doing? Slide it in on WhatsApp. What is this? Are you from my old like global tech startup role? What is this? And then they were just like, oh, Coffee's coming through. We're looking for a hype man. Are you free on these dates for rehearsal and for a performance in then New Zealand potentially? And I was just like, we could probably work something out because I loved Coffee. Like I really dug Coffee's music. And so it was pretty straightforward. It was a bit like Jamaica time, it was a bit like, well, let me know because I think it's next week, right? Like, And then a rehearsal space came together.
Right.
And then when I went into the rehearsal feeling a little bit nervous, I immediately saw Nadia. I was like, yo, the fam there. We got crew in the dance squad. And it was just a great time.
You didn't know to that point.
I didn't know until I arrived.
Yeah,
and then we saw each other. It was like, bro, what are you doing here? I was like, come on, girl, let's go. Like, we were just excited. It felt like really community based all of a sudden. Like, it felt like a real community of supportive, kind energy rather than, am I about to get fired because I missed a cue or something?
Yeah.
And I just remember Coffee's team and doing the first, he's like, all right, big man. They would always just call me big man. All right, big man. what you it's like when you start. I'll stop doing the accent because I want to, take it there. But they were just like, when you do the intro, it has to be this hyped. And I was just like, so you're talking like ladies and gentlemen. And I started like a WWE style stupid thing. He's just like, all right, you got the voice. Well, we need it. And then I took some notes and then we just had fun. And by the time we're in New Zealand, I was just like, you know what? I got you, fam. Don't worry about the notes. Aotearoa! Kia ora! And I just made it culturally a vibe. And the crowd in New Zealand, I remember in Auckland, they were just like, ah! Like the response was epic. And I saw Coffee was on stage hidden behind a prop. And when she heard the crowd respond to like, Kia ora, Aotearoa! Like that. And the roar, she just looked at me with this look of, I just remember like afterwards her being like, you did Jamaica proud, man. Like, I never thought we'd get it that hyped outside of Jamaica. And I was just like, oh, that's a big vibe. I actually just got the message for their 2025 tour.
Amazing.
So I don't know if it'll all come together. I don't know if I'll be in country or like what's going to be happening.
Yeah.
But hopefully I get to, tour with her again in some way. So that'll be cool.
You were behind a little booth there? Did you have decks or like?
They were like decks and stuff. I didn't need to touch them.
Oh, right.
They did not trust me with a single technical task. I was like, I used to do live looping with like 500 cues over 60 minutes. But anyway, it was a very chill gig. I literally just had to hype and do a little bit of dubs and things like that. It was chill. It was a good experience.
Yeah, such a beautiful festival. Like it, has its quirks, has its moments. It's they're still. I think just like kind of finding their feet in many ways. But I appreciated that environment so much. It's just
yes.
Like breathing around island folk, around melanated folk, around Pacifica folk. It was like
it's real. It's a real novelty.
Yeah,
it's so unfamiliar.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Every friend I've seen who's from a kind of diverse or colorful background, has literally just been stories of like never seen this many black and brown faces in one space at once. Yeah. And just the joy of that and the safety of that and you just feel, I love that it's called Promised Land. It's so funny. Like it's just such an it's just a cup feeling sort of experience to just be around that. Yeah.
Did you have that kind of experience as well growing up? Like for me in like 20 years of like going to and working on festivals, sometimes like I feel like the only brown person or black or brown person in a lot of those spaces. Have you had some experiences like that? Like
same.
Yeah.
Always the same. Even now, so many places, so many places I go. I have a good sense of humor about it. Like I have fun. But yeah, there is a sort of like, it's almost like an exhaustion that you can feel that you can't even necessarily register until you end up somewhere like Promised Land and you're like, oh, wait, what? Because you're just so used to being, and like, because I'm also a bit like I'm tall, big guy. So I'm like, people looking at me because I'm just like a, imposing kind of figure. Is it because I'm the only brown person in the space? Or is it they know me from a show?
Right.
And you don't know the context. Or do they know me from day job, from the higher education space? Or are they a government person who I did a facilitation panel with? But there's always just like these double looks. And that like, it doesn't chip away at you necessarily, but there is just this like, it's like when you've had slightly less oxygen in a room and you don't realize until someone opens the door and you're like, oh man, like I didn't realize like I wasn't actually deeply breathing. Those opportunities to deeply breathe hit different. But otherwise, I think you generally, I don't know if you agree with this, but like in that kind of metropolitan Australian sort of experience of festivals or communities or even just spaces, you kind of just normalize. You normalize to it and you're just used to it. And I remember I was trying to explain it to someone before, like a couple of weeks ago, and we were just riffing. And they said something like, oh, it's like if everywhere we went, I was the only female. And like what that would feel like after weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks if you were typically the only female. And if you wanted to be around other females, you had to go to the lower socioeconomic side of town.
Oof.
And how that hits. And then you're like, well, why is that? And so we're back with the pickles. If you use that as a soundbite, slavery is a pickle was said earlier, so that gives it a bit of context. But, you know, you see these run-on effects. So I now can't be in a restaurant where I'm the only brown person except for on the music. Like the music that's playing is black music, like Anderson .Paak will be on the music.
Right.
But all the customers are not people of color. And then the kitchen, the service staff and the music.
Not even necessarily the floor staff sometimes.
Not the floor staff.
The kitchen staff.
The kitchen staff. You got to see a swinging metal door to see a brown face, or you can hear brown music, and that's how they get that diversity element into the room, because it's nice and palatable and it's nice and comfortable, and, you know, black and brown music is funky and soulful and it adds to the environment. But generally speaking, I can't sit in that space and one, not register it, but also not think about the larger socio-historical context that leads to that sort of moment happening. And it's really easy if you just think of, well, what if you were the only female in the room? Or what if you were the only person under 60? Imagine going to spaces and you were the only person under 60, and every now and then you saw another young person who was like, yo, how? Okay. And then that was it. It reminds me, I'm just on a tangent now, but I went on a cruise with some friends once.
Yeah.
This is the only cruise I've been on, and I dare say it might be the last. Yeah, it was like a P&O cruise.
Yeah, right.
Our friend Bree convinced us all it would be the best time, and I don't care if you hear this, Bree, it was trash. It was not what I expected to be. I thought it would be a cruise with other young people and experiences of other communities of young people. We were the only people that were like under 40 on this cruise, and I was the only brown person in the clientele base.
Of like hundreds.
Every other staff member and kitchen worker was brown. And so literally, while we were on this like 5-day cruise.
Traveling like islands?
Yeah, it was like Vanuatu, New Caledonia. Like, it was that kind of P&O little route.
Yeah.
I had, I think, 5 to 7 or 8 times where people came up like, excuse me, our room hasn't. And I just remember being like, oh, bless your heart, I don't work here. You know?
Yeah.
And I like, again, I have a bit of empathy, so I'm just like, oh, this poor faux pas moment. Like, this just doesn't know. They're not trying to be like that. Maybe statistically a couple are, but most people are just like, oh, sorry, it's... I was like, oh, no, for sure. I'm the only brown person here, like, outside of the staff, so I fully understand. But even, like, serving food, I'd just be like, hey, brother, how we doing? You know, and I'd get these looks from, like...
From the
staff, from whatever their background. I don't want to say they're all from Vanuatu or whatever. But just these, like, brown faces looking at me almost like, how'd you get on that side? And I remember I describe it as it felt like a segregation simulator.
Yeah.
There's this real, and I was like the glitch.
Whoa.
And I remember just walking around and being like, damn, it's not a vibe. Like, it's not a great vibe, but I did again tap into the absurdity of it. And I was like, well, I'm the one who signed up for a cruise, which is arguably one of the most Western, just hedonism, justice. Oh, how much is it all you can eat? Every meal is all you can eat. And then you just into the ocean and people can die on the ship, and we just put them in a morgue and we just keep cruising around. It's just such an absurd experience. And so I kind of laughed at myself. But yeah, I always think of those kinds of moments as well, in those little moments. But I will say there are more and more events, and like shout outs to the whole legacy of West End and those community events where you do see more diversity in certain events now. It's not full promised land, but it's better.
Yeah, because Promised Land has that injection of like the music is so important and so rare that folks, black and brown folks, fly from around the country to go to that one weekend only event. So it particularly for South East Queensland, it has a pretty extreme injection of cultural diversity for that weekend.
Yes, an injection of intention. Absolutely. I was reflecting on this the other day, just speaking on that note of like, because I always start to hear voices of other opinions whenever I'm talking about something. I don't know why my brain does it. I think it's like religious trauma or something.
Like counterpoints.
Yeah, counterpoints. I always hear a little devil's advocate running like a little ChatGPT thread of different takes. And it's like, well, why does inclusion matter? Like, why does inclusion have to matter? And that's totally fair. That's like totally fair.
Podcast bros in your ear.
Yeah, it's like, well, let's dig into that, Katie. Why does inclusion matter? Like, that's fair enough, right? And one thing I thought of was, what's interesting about asking that question is it's never really asked about someone from a marginalized group or from the minority of some kind of group. It's usually asked from within the mainstream. Well, what does inclusion matter? Oh, this inclusion stuff's gone too far. It's usually said from within a majority group, that kind of opinion.
Yeah.
And I thought what's interesting about life is if you get to live a long life, almost everyone will get the experience of being a marginalized group at some point. Because even if you're born upper class, white, just so on and so forth.
Yeah.
At some point, if you get to live a long life, you'll be the old person in the room that not everyone wants to talk to.
That's it.
Because you won't be interesting or attractive or have anything to offer necessarily. And so even if it just is that experience, you'll feel like, oh, well, this isn't very inclusive. Like, oh, I don't feel very welcomed here. Oh, I feel like people don't even see me. So hopefully, if you live a long life, anyone will get to realize the answer of why inclusion matters, because it's actually a fundamental part of being human.
That's it.
You know? And so I always like thinking about that when I have that devil's advocate kind of voice going.
Yeah.
Because whilst it looks like, well, a couple of brown guys talking about inclusion, oh, there it goes again. You know, it's like, well, yeah, but unfortunately, we won't get to feel excluded only in our 80s and 90s.
Right. Yeah.
We carry a whole different it's the combo package, if you will, of feeling threatened whilst being perceived a threat.
Right. And it's like a lifelong constant thing that we're carrying around.
Yeah. But I do like that the democratization of exclusion because of Father Time. Everyone, if they're lucky to live a long life, will get to feel what it can be like to be in spaces where you're not included.
Right. So empathy will come.
Maybe. And it might come from 79-year-old Janice who's like, well, I still don't care for the Browns, but I do feel they should cater to more of us old folks. No. Even then, tribalism will endure. But yeah, no, it's interesting.
And it even makes you think that like the aged carers at that point would be quite likely be brown folks.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
After them in that moment.
Yeah. And I was going to say, like, so maybe they'll be like, oh, well, they're not all bad. But usually it's like, she's stealing my candies. Like, no, it's like, she's not stealing your candies, Mr. Christopherson, please. No. Realistically, from this point in time, it'll just be AI. It'll be AI. And then, I mean, that's a whole other chat, but I'm just watching this whole point in history with Trump is president twice. And then we've just developed a chip that can do in 5 minutes what used to take septillion years for supercomputers to do.
Yeah.
And AI and this AI LLM started to copy itself onto a backup drive when it thought it was going to get deleted. So it's showing signs of survival instinct and all these points of data. It really feels like season 10 Game of Thrones. Like the writers are all just like, we got to make this one good. We got to just throw everything we got. We got climate change coming in from the left side, AI takeover coming in from the right, mass inequality, mass climate injustice shifting. We got global genocide, mass apathy and normalization to that. We got there's just so many things all happening at once that, and it's also because we're so plugged in on social media and the internet makes everything available. But there is this sense of what? All I hear is a FIFA commentator in my head every now and then when I read a headline. It's going to be a hell of a season. I just hear this anticipatory, almost hype of whatever's going down.
Yeah.
What an experience to be a part of. And I say that completely from the seat of my own privilege of getting to just watch and not suffer the extremities of some of those things. Free Palestine. You know what I mean? Genuinely. It's just such a strange experience. So bizarre. Do you feel that? Do you feel the absurdity amidst all the things going on? Or do you kind of feel like you've got a sense of a diet that you... an information diet that keeps you kind of not overwhelmed?
The way that I try to be not overwhelmed is to prioritize audio content, like digesting my news via audio. But it still gets to these things. Sometimes there's a slight delay because of the length of my podcast queue. But I do. I think about the way that they're describing AI and relating it to social media. Like when it came in, it was like all new and shiny. We're like, oh, this is amazing. We can connect with friends. And then, you know, like 20 odd years in to it, we see the depths of it and we see the issues, and trying to take that template and apply it to things that are moving in orders of magnitude, like computing and like AI and those sorts of things. Yeah, there's definitely existential pylons happening, and it is yeah, we are in a privileged position of not being on the forefront as yet, but it's gonna be interesting for sure. Yeah,
I'm just giving that airtime because it just sounded so like it's going to be interesting for sure. Cue montage of Skynet.
proper Skynet territory.
Yeah, no. I am grateful though. What would you say, like genuinely, what would you say would be 3 different things that you are grateful for or that are bringing you joy at the moment?
3 different things. Okay. Continuing to build a relationship with my partner.
Yes, let's go.
And you know, getting the joy out of it that I am getting and have gotten so far. Being able to, you know, I guess when we talk about like, you know, the younger self looking forward and, you know, pinching yourself, dream moment kind of thing, like being able to employ myself mostly through my own business. Like I work a little bit here and there for other people, but mostly it's client work for my own business, and that is like pumping right now, as well as
so good.
Work for other people. Thirdly, I guess my head is heading back to that yard from my party, where I'm surrounded by just beautiful, largely black and brown folk who, like, you know, different intersections of Brizzy, some of who've maybe like not interacted with like the other little circle or that little thing or those sorts of things. So I think I do enjoy that kind of like the bumblebee pollinator kind of role. Like what's going on over here? Okay, yeah. What about that over here? Do you know this person and this person? So I guess, yeah, like 3 years into being in Brizzy now, like seeing some of those connections and cross-pollination sort of like blossom in different ways. I think they're 3 for me. How about you?
That's beautiful, man. That's a good old slice. You got like relationship, community, and career, meaningful work. Like that's a great balance.
Yeah,
that's cool. Congrats on that milestone with your work as well. Like, what a vibe when you can be like, I'm doing it.
Yeah,
I'm doing the damn thing.
Yeah,
that's huge.
Definitely.
My heart just goes out to everyone who exists at the intersection of creativity and capitalism. You know?
That's
so
it.
Anyone doing it, I'm just like, he's at the 30. He's at the 20. He's at the 10. Like, you're just cheering for people who can find that balance, find that step. I feel it myself. I'm trying to do so much. And for me, it's like this like conversation in my head of how can I sustain myself and build a future whilst also maximizing my maximum amount of positive impact on the world and immediate world and communities without burning out and without undoing myself with not doing sustainable stuff as well. It's really tricky finding that balance, but yeah, it's a good journey. So I guess for me, the gratitude is around, I think I'm not square one, but I'm not square 99, but being somewhere on the board of that same balance of meaningful work. I've been doing like the Roman MC workshops and that freestyle rap for life skills.
Yeah.
I've been doing that in the youth justice space, like with youth in detention. And that's a whole experience unto itself existentially.
Yeah.
You talk about scenes that you can put into context of historical ripple effects. And that's one of those things. But the work that I get to do in that space, some of the transformations, some of the outcomes of it, like it became in the first year of delivering it, like the highest rated or one of the top 2 programs out of like 63 programs in the Queensland system.
Whoa.
And I remember just being like, this is like I backed myself just enough to make a website. I didn't even market or advertise. I just started doing things and and I was like, the amount of good things that have happened, not even like good things for me, but like opportunities to help young lives or young people or other people, other communities. That whole process of just realizing how much goodness can happen from a little bit of effort. Shout out to Dan Wilson, my oldest friend, who gave me that quote one time. It's amazing what a little bit of effort can do. Just a little bit, not even like heaps, just get going. Like just that get going, how much that can do.
Yeah.
And I've been enjoying that ever since. So that's a huge gratitude point. And like being at the end of the year, yes, I'm a little burnt out. Yes, it's been a wacky podcast. But like genuinely, I'm like, oh, I'm actually proud of myself. And it's not because of my output and I'm bringing enough value and, you know, you are validated, black man. Like, it's not that sort of like sense of, oh, I'm doing good, right? It's like no, there's been genuinely profound moments that have happened because of events that have been put into motion because of showing up and because of having some courage and because of backing myself. Like having a non-verbal student speak for the first time and then rap in the same workshop and people just being like, what's happening? What? Like some Disney scene? Things like that where you're like, oh, there's like really cool, profound like moments happening.
Huge.
That is genuinely the place of gratitude where I'm like, I did not have that as a goal, but the basic formula of just a bit of effort and consistency, all kinds of cool things have happened. So gratitude for that journey is a huge one. And then gratitude for the people in my life and the depth of the conversations and connections that I get to have from old friends and new friends. Because it sounded so wholesome. From old friends and new friends.
Keeping the Disney vibe, yeah.
But truly though, like this is just another moment of that joy of like us getting to connect and actually have like, again, I'll say this is my gratitude thing. And I know I've been talking like a lot. It is a podcast, I guess. But the coolest quote over the last year for me has been a quote that I heard. It was on a podcast with Professor John Viveki. I think it was the Theo Von podcast. And they were talking about, he has a whole lecture series on awakening from the meaning crisis. It's like this 50-part lecture series. He's deep philosopher and has one of those people that just sounds like they have a PhD in every area of human life. And the quote was attributed to Seneca, which I'm not too sure about, but the quote is, even when you are backed into a corner, you can jump into the sky. And what that speaks to, and it has more context when it's spoken in the podcast, but it's all about in our lives, we try to live on this x-axis of more property, more resource, more reputation, more wealth, where it's like, how many likes, how many followers, how many streams did I get on this? Like that horizontal axis of territory. And then realizing at any point you can invoke depth and curiosity and stargaze or have a D&M where you share a vulnerable moment with someone else and this vertical axis creeps into your life and this three-dimensionality kicks in. It's a life on earth gig. It's conversations like this. It's being present with yourself enough or in nature. That three-dimensionality, being able to sky jump, for lack of a better term, has made it feel like I'm not backed into a corner in any way. And I feel like I've been able to sneak that in to others who might feel or be tempted to feel like they are simply backed into a corner, recognizing you can jump into the sky, even if it's just for a freestyle rap, or even if it's just for sharing around this or that. That is this well of infinite gratitude for me at the moment, where I'm like, we learned how to sky jump, and you can never take that away from someone. Literally, you can never take that away. You can be, I'm gonna get emotional if we talk about Gaza, but I saw a band that had formed from a group of refugees who had met in a particular camp, and they'd formed a band. I think it was literally called Freedom Band or something. And they were singing in different dialect. And it was just like, you could literally see these musicians in the most war-torn, like horrific circumstances. And they were still like stank facing at the groove and the harmonies. And I was like, you can't stop the sky jump, son. You can't stop that will, that ability to go deep. Like when everybody, it's like when they go low, we go high. It's like there's always that opportunity to jump into the sky. So that's the gratitude point that's just been shaking me like for my own life, but what I can see in the world now It's really beautiful.
That is so beautiful. And I want to show you some gratitude for engaging the vertical axis here today. And yeah, thanks so much for coming on Creative Tales today, Roman.
Thanks for having me, man.
My pleasure.